Big splashes or a reset? Breaking down the Falcons' offseason approach to team building and which is the best path to becoming a perennial playoff team.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast in the Western Hemisphere. And today's Locked On Falcons podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So if you don't know me, I'm your humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for 2 decades, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP, still going strong here on Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. And on today's daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, we are joined by none other than Jarvis Davis, Locked On Sports Atlanta. I know so many of you guys miss Jarvis, myself, Maria Martin, Tanitra Batiste on the Falcons Squad show, but we got you covered here on this Thursday or Friday, whenever you're checking out this show. And we're going to be talking about the Falcons offseason approach. We have new people in the building and we don't really know what they're going to do. Like, after 5 years of Terry Fontenot, we kind of had an idea of what Terry was going to do and how he did things, but we can only guess. And so we'll spend a lot of today's episode guessing and speculating and making a case, should anybody in that building that will be decision makers this offseason be listening to this illustrious podcast on what this offseason approach should be, as well as talk a little bit about the edge rusher position and sort of the concerns there now that it was a position of strength a month ago, and now it's a position of I don't know what's going to happen. So how do the Falcons try to figure out what's going to happen? But Jarvis, let's get into this offseason approach. Right. We, as I said, new regime, don't know a lot about them. Basically, what we do know is that they say they want to build in the trenches. Of course, everybody says that. And then the question is, will you actually follow through on that belief? And that's the question. But, we're optimistic. This is one of the few things I'm optimistic about here on this podcast, Jarvis, that they will actually follow through on that notion. But I'm curious, how do we see the rest of the offseason sort of playing out? Right? Are they going to be pushing to try to get over the hump, or are they going to do a little bit of a reset like Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham did in Chicago when they first got there? I'm curious what are your thoughts.
I think there's going to be a real push to build a foundation of this team, right? And I think that you start with figuring out where your quarterback is from a health standpoint. I'm talking about looking at year one. Like, okay, year one, under our new regime, what is Michael Penix? Who is Michael Penix? What can he be? And I think once you establish that, then you start to work your way, to the offensive line and try to figure out a way to get some more draft picks to try to build that up, because Jake Matthews, at some point, the man is going to fall off. And then Caleb McGarry, do you want to keep him around for another year? I think those are some of the things that you have to do when you talk about foundational pieces: the offensive tackle position, the quarterback position. And then let's go over to the defense side. I know we're going to get into it a little bit later on, but there are a lot of question marks at that spot as well. And the defensive tackle spot. So notice I'm standing in a certain place. I'm real close to the football right now. So I think the offseason approach is based off what we've been told. And I was sitting right there when Ian Cunningham said it. He said he's all about building in the trenches. And I think that's exactly what he's going to do until he proves me wrong. And I think they should and have to, start up front and build through the trenches. And however you can get some more draft picks, man, don't sit up there on draft day like, oh, man, all we need is this guy right here and we'll be all good. Nope. No. You have 3 guys. You have 3 pure edge rushers under contract for 2026. So you need to build that room up as much. And one of them hadn't played a regular season snap yet. And the other one is going through some legal troubles right now. So Jalen Walker in that mud like Will Smith right now. You know what I'm saying? Looking around, like on the last episode, like, oh, dang, where everybody at? So, yeah, man, that offseason approach has to be to build a foundation of this team so you can have sustained success.
Yeah. And I'm curious, Jarvis, where does these, sexy wide receiver and cornerback, potential holes on those spots? Because, to me, I kind of look at the wide receiver room. I feel like it's kind of Drake London sort of looking around like Will Smith. And it's like, who else is going to be here, right?
Yeah.
Is it going to be Darnell Mooney back? Is it going to be Casey Washington back? Is Kadero Hodge going to be back, right? And then you have plenty of bodies in the cornerback room, but the real challenge there is you got to get someone that actually can move the needle for you, particularly at that CB2 position opposite AJ Terrell, as we have discussed many times, and everybody in this fan base knows has been a revolving door for 5 years. You tried it for 2 years with Mike Hughes. I don't hate Mike Hughes. He did his best, but his best was not good enough. That's the bottom line. It's just not good enough.
We want better.
and we kind of knew how that would go. And, as you mentioned, Jarvis, they don't have a ton of draft capital. And then their cap space, while they're sitting fine, they're kind of in the middle of the pack as we sit here today with salary cap space projected currently, I believe, is about 26 million under the salary cap, but potentially 16 million of that can go away if they put a franchise tag on Kyle Pitts. And we're not going to get into the whole Kyle Pitts conversation because we've had that conversation a bunch over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But I do want to kind of talk about, do they kind of take the approach of Terry Fontenot where it's just like, okay, well, I have limited assets, and so I have to really maximize these limited assets, or do they find ways to increase those assets? And then the question is, how do they go about that? And I want to get more into that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Now, have you ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is going to give you a chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. You and one other person taking the flights, getting those tickets, getting the whole experience. And if you're already looking at the board and thinking about, which team do I think is going to make that deep postseason run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I certainly love betting on futures at this point in the year, coming off the All-Star break. Whether it's picking that team that's going to win the championship or make the conference title, it's going to add an extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now not only can you win some cash with your pick, you can also win a trip to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started and use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So when we're talking about the limited resources the Falcons have and sort of their offseason approach, wanting to build in the trenches, but still having some major issues at some of the non-trench positions, the
cute positions.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, what's the Jarvis Davis term for,
cute.
The selfie positions, right?
Selfie stick positions, selfie stick, Look at me, hey,
And so they have some holes there that would certainly improve this team quite a bit if they could fill those holes, and they don't have all the assets in the world. And so does that affect their approach to the offseason? Does that mean they get a little bit more aggressive, moving money around? Does that mean that they look at a couple of players on the roster, right? You go back to Ian Cunningham and Ryan Poles' first offseason with the Bears. One of the biggest move they made that offseason was trading away Khalil Mack, right? That cleared a bunch of cap space, that got them some draft capital. Is there a player like that on the Falcons roster that you legitimately shop? Is that Kyle Pitts? Is that Jesse Bates? Is that somebody else? I'm curious, how do you think this team should approach or will approach going about trying to create more assets if they want to fill a lot of these areas? Or is it simply, hey, we're just going to do the best we can to add as much talent at some areas that we need help at this offseason, but we're really not going to be able to make that push until 2027, and this is much more of a 2-year process than necessarily a 1-year process. Where do you weigh in on that?
I think when you look at this draft, I think the Falcons are in luck, right? Because that selfie stick position that they need, hey, that position is pretty deep this year. There's a lot of talent all up and down this draft, and I think the scouting department is going to have to earn their money in 2026 when it comes to the wide receiver position. So I feel that whether it be trading back or Jesse Bates is interesting. We can have that conversation, but I know you probably don't want to. We can go there, and see what you can take the temperature on what's out there for him. But that would be a little bit too splashy for my liking. Like that'll be like, oh, we're trying to do a quick fix. No. I like to go about it the boring way. Trade back about 5 or 6 spots because somebody is lusting. There's another Terry Fontenot in the draft. Like, oh man, I got to have this guy. So we'll give you another 4th this year or another 3rd this year if they're trying to trade up in the 2nd round. And we'll give you another 5th or whatever next year. So those are type of moves that I would like for the Falcons to kind of take a look at and visit. And if you feel like you are in a hardcore 2-year plan, you take a look at Jesse Bates because he has value. Like he has some value. And I think that when you talk about look at the number that he's at right now and you kind of weigh that out for a contender, I'm like, hey, look at that production. Like, hey, might be some value there. So I think that, Ian coming in and having that conversation with a guy like Bates or his agent or however they want to do it, because this is the time to do it. Like the combine coming up next week, like this is the time that you have these type of conversations. So I really am in a space where Cunningham just needs to be deliberate, touch those conversations that might be difficult on the surface and see where this team is. But I'm not interested in these splashy moves. Like I feel like a splashy move would be trading him. But if you're able to get some good return, or you've determined that the return it doesn't make sense, or a team is trying to short you, don't do it, man. Like, don't do it. Don't feel like you have to do anything like that. And I feel like if the Falcons would be fine if they just be deliberate about where they are. And I'm real big on them being honest about where they are as a team in 2026 and making moves accordingly.
Yeah. I look at what Ian Cunningham did in Chicago. And, that first year with Ryan Poles, obviously Ryan Poles, general manager, Ian Cunningham, assistant GM. But it did feel like the Bears kind of did a mini reset. Now, you could argue that maybe they reset a little too hard because they went 3-14 that year. But at the same time, that wound up helping them out because they were able to trade that number 1 pick in 2023 to the Carolina Panthers, get DJ Moore, pick up eventually what would be the number 1 pick in 2024. And that was a big part of their ability to rebuild sort of the assets that they were able to get in that trade. And I'm wondering if, looking at that approach, because when you look at the rest of the moves they made that first offseason, like you go down the list of free agents that they signed, and it's like, I bet most Falcon fans will be like, I don't know who these people are. And none of these people had really much of an impact in Chicago all that much. It was just kind of low and mid-tier moves because they kind of inherited an organization, where the GM was Ryan Pace, who Falcon fans may be familiar with, who was, the shadow GM in Atlanta the last couple of years. And Matt Nagy, and those guys were on the hot seat and they were kind of all in desperate last year. Reminiscent of, a situation perhaps in Atlanta and sort of, kind of similar to what Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith inherited in year 1, right? Where the Falcons under Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitrov had a questionable cap situation. Now, this cap situation right now in Atlanta is not nearly as bad as it was, in 2021, but there is a way to kind of be like, hey, we're going to take a chill pill in 2026 offseason in terms of big spending. we might, slash some salary or whatever, and then we'll have all the money we want in 2027. So if we do find out through the course of 2026, we need to maybe make that push because this team is not maybe as far along as we think, we'll have the flexibility to do that in 2027. And so if I was guessing, that's kind of where I would think they're going to go. So it's going to be not really any of the big sexy moves that people, are hoping for. But, when we talk about Kevin Stefanski's role in this, right? One of the narratives coming out of Cleveland was, Kevin Stefanski wasn't really, making decisions. It was really people above him, the GM, the owner, etc. I don't know if I really buy that. As the more I listen to at least Browns people that cover the Browns the last couple of years, I don't know if I really buy that. But
yeah,
that's kind of the narrative where coming out of Cleveland. And so if that's the case, and you go back to Stefanski's first offseason in Cleveland, they had I think the second most cap space going into that offseason, and they spent money on guys like Austin Hooper, Jack Conklin to kind of beef up those trenches and whatnot. And then after that, nothing real big splashy or anything like that. But they were at least a little bit more willing to spend. And I'm curious, when we talk about Kevin Stefanski, if we're buying the narrative that he wasn't necessarily in control in Cleveland, and now in Atlanta, given this second opportunity, no guarantee he's going to get a third opportunity to be a head coach in this league. Maybe does that push him to be maybe a little bit more aggressive, maybe a little bit more willing to, go into that room and demand to Ian Cunningham, look, I had to, shut my mouth in Cleveland. I'm not going to shut my mouth in Atlanta. What are your thoughts on Stefanski's potential influence on some of the moves that the Falcons could make this offseason?
I don't buy that Kevin Stefanski had no pull, no ranking at all in Cleveland, because reportedly he wanted Dillon Gabriel, and the owner or general manager or a combination of both of those guys wanted Shedeur. And so when Dillon Gabriel got in the game, he was terrible. So yeah. And then you also got to look at in the beginning, right? He won Coach of the Year twice there. He got them to the playoffs, and allegedly he wanted, or reportedly he wanted, Baker Mayfield to stay in, but Deshaun Watson, nasty man, was forced upon him, and he had to, figure out that situation. And then he got hurt, and cap was all jacked up and all that stuff. So I think that I'm not going to give Kevin Stefanski a complete pass about what happened in Cleveland, but when you look at the big doo-doo messes that happened up there, man, he probably didn't have at least one of them, because Dillon Gabriel, you missed on the quarterback. All right, cool, whatever, that happens. But, but when you had opportunity where you were giving someone who is capable of being a starter in the league, and he's proven that since he's left there, in Baker Mayfield, you got some production. Because at the end of the day, you're the coach. You have full control of what happens on the field, right? Now, as far as who buys the groceries, who make decisions of guys that are on that field, that's another conversation. But when you have a team that is a full 53 on Sundays, you're responsible for that, and you got to be able to answer to that. And I feel like a couple years he was able to, get it done. But, these last two, I don't know what that was. It was ugly. So I feel like right now, I think he's going to be, I won't say he will be super aggressive, because we saw where that got this team. And I think that he wants to win right now. Like I said, coaches and general managers have two different mindsets. General managers have to think about the future, and coaches are trying to win now. And I think it's going to be Ian Cunningham's job to be able to balance that for him when it comes to salary cap spending and trading for draft capital, or moving back to gain more, or even considering moving up, God forbid that. But I think that, they are there to balance each other out. And I think that for him, knowing the type of owner that he has, an owner who wanted Deshaun Watson too, I hope that Arthur Blank has learned his lesson. That's why I brought up this idea to bring someone in, a football person, to be that, to bridge the gap between Arthur Blank and general manager and coach. They did that. So hopefully we won't have to worry about that foolishness anymore. And I feel like, Stefanski and Cunningham and Matt, they should be able to figure this thing out, man, from a balanced perspective, because like trying to make moves to try to make the playoffs in their first year, man, bump all that. I just want to see progression. I want to see, progress. I want to see this team be built. I want to see young talent. I want to see cheap labor. I want them to get younger up front on the offensive line. I want them to continue to get younger on the defensive side of the football as well. So, yeah, man, in order to do that, you don't got to tear it all the way down, but you definitely got to say, hey, we got to take a more conservative / aggressive approach to building for the future.
Yeah. I think you want to see a more sustainable approach for the Atlanta Falcons, where they have been in a very unsustainable approach these last couple of off seasons, because there's been so much focus on that last piece to get them over the hump, because this team is on the verge. And, I just know there's a lot of fans out there that are still in that mindset. And I don't
want to hear that. They don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
They're trying to go to the playoffs.
I don't fault fans, because like if you're a season ticket holder at MBS and you've been, there from the beginning, 9 years now, and 8 years, you've been waiting for a home playoff game in your home stadium, and
these beings, period.
We're on a podcast being like, hey, take a step back, and they're like, no, I don't want that. I need to see a home playoff game. I get it, like I empathize with it, but I do think you have to have a little bit more of a long-term mindset, especially now that you have this opportunity, as opposed to the last couple of years where you have guys on different timelines, right? Which is part of what that search firm, that was one of their conclusions that they came to, where it's just like, you got people.
Where are we going?
Yeah, like what's the vision? What's the direction of this team? And I think you need to have everybody on the same page. And what page that is what we're talking about. But sustainable success, right? It looked like the Falcons were headed in the right direction when it came to their pass rush and their edge rush room, with the big moves that they made last all season. And now the last couple of weeks, it feels like it's a lot less sustainable, let's say. And so what is going to be the Falcons' approach to their edge rusher room? And we'll get into that, guys, as we wrap up this Locked On Falcons podcast. It is draft season, and yes, with the combine coming up, but we are not talking about NFL draft prospects. We are talking about the 5-hour energy flavor draft, breaking down those tasty flavors, which are the best and which just might be sleepers. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and only one can take the top spot. 5-hour energy has a wide variety of flavors, something for everyone. When I used to stroll into the gas station before my day job in the mornings, I'd grab a 5-hour energy. And back then it was just the berry and the grape flavors. They're both classics, but they've leveled up in the years since. There are 17 flavors now. Peach mango takes my top spot with its sweet tropical flavor that takes me away. And I definitely want to try their confetti craze flavor with the sweet birthday cake inspired flavor with the buttery, freshly baked confetti cake, sweet vanilla frosting, and that sprinkle of sweetness in every sip. Who's number one on your board? Find your new flavor at 5-Hour Energy Shots, available online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. So before we wrap up today's episode, I do want to let you guys know that, if you are an everyday of this podcast, we appreciate you. You are the reason why Locked On is the #1 sports podcast network in the Western Hemisphere. And, the offseason doesn't exist for the everydayers, especially if you are part of the Everydayer Club. You can join the discussion on the Falcons year-round in the Locked On Podcast Network Discord, as well as get every episode ad-free. Head on over to lockedonfalcons.supercast.com or hit that link in the description below to find out more. So, Jarvis, let's talk about edge. And I kind of want to talk about this because in the next day or so, in the next few days, I'm going to do a breakdown on whether or not the Falcons should pass or pay Leonard Floyd this offseason. I'm pretty sure I know where you stand on that issue, but given the question marks surrounding James Pearce's future here in Atlanta, what should be the Falcons' approach trying to address some of their concerns at edge? As you mentioned, Jalen Walker is the only true edge. You got Zach Harrison as a big edge. You don't know what you have in Braylon Trice. You can't, at this point in time, really go into 2026 confident that he's going to contribute, although we'll still give him that chance. You got Floyd at free agent, Arnold Ebiketie a free agent, Khalid Kareem, D'Angelo Malone. These are all free agents. So how do you go about addressing the edge rusher position? Do you go out there and make a big splash for like a Bradley Chubb or something, as a name I've heard around? Do you go for maybe a younger pass rusher that maybe has more success and potential ahead of him, a Kwity Paye, a Jalen Phillips, a Boye Mafe, someone like that? Do you wait for the draft and go really young? Or do you just simply like, look, we'll pick one or two of these guys that are headed to free agency? Probably not in your eyes, Leonard Floyd, but one of the other two guys, and then we'll bring those guys back. Where do you sort of stand on this team's offseason approach at the edge rusher position?
I feel like the Falcons are look again, because just like the wide receiver position is pretty deep in this draft, the edge position is super deep. It's probably the deepest it's been in quite some time when you talk about talent up and through down the draft. If you do your homework, scouting department's going to have to earn their money, because guess what? I ain't going after no Bradley Chubb. I ain't going after no Kwity Paye or Boye Mafe. I remember when Boye came out, and I was intrigued by him. And then John Schneider took a chance on him, and hey, this is where we are. But that will be one of those deals where if he's still lurking after the new league year is going, like, that's going to be one of those 2nd, 3rd week guys. If they're still available, I'll have those conversations. Like, hey man, what you think about 1-year deal, $5-6 million? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I would approach those guys, right? Because that's kind of like that second tier young guy, potentially may be able to work with them, get them in the rotation, and they may be able to give you something on the back, on the middle of that rotation, so to speak. So I feel like they're going to have to be measured with this particular position, because thankfully they do. This is a position that's very deep. There are some guys that are first round talent, I believe. They're going to be available in the 2nd, maybe even the 3rd round, because this is a super deep class in my eyes. And I think that the Falcons are in luck, because when you have a position that you need bodies, essentially, that it will behoove them to take advantage of that, because that's why I feel like, man, it's almost a guarantee that I think Ian's gonna trade back, man. I don't think no one actually said, yeah, man, we had 5 picks going to that draft, and then we end up with 10. I like those picks. Yeah, because they're gonna need some swings in this particular draft, because like I said, man, it's all about getting that good cheap labor, man. Get those guys on those rookie deals and get them running around and doing the doggone thing before it's time to get really paid, because that's what everybody's trying to get to, that second contract. And you want to be able to at least have a trophy or smelt a trophy before it's time for those guys to get paid. Because, hey, Kenneth Walker was the Super Bowl MVP. You heard anything about a franchise tag? Just saying, man, this is the game, because when guys, when they get those trophies, man, like, it seems like it's never fails. Really good contributor to your team is going to be up for a contract, and you probably going to have to let them walk. So, but it's up to that general manager to have the foresight, knowing that's coming, and having someone ready to step in once that guy is no longer in that office.
Yeah. I'll be fascinated to see what they did. I was watching some wide receivers, Jarvis, some selfie guys,
Okay.
And they were playing Michigan, and I was watching Derek Moore, and I was like, so
it's good down in Mobile. Though.
Yeah, he looked good in Mobile, and he looks good on film too. So
yeah,
I agree with you. I do think this is a golden opportunity for the Falcons to add more youth, and certainly, as I've said here on this podcast, like, we don't know what's going to happen with Jace Pierce. There's a real possibility he could play 0 football games moving forward, and there's a real possibility that he gets suspended for 6 weeks or whatever in like 2 or 3 years, and that's it. And then he plays 7+ years in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And so, if you're the Falcons,
or it could be Alden Smith.
Yeah, or it could be that. Yes.
Yes.
Any.
It can happen.
You know, these are two end points. I'm just saying, like anything that happened in between that.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're the Falcons, you sort of plan for the worst case scenario, and so the best case scenario is, oh, James Pearce is back, Jalen Walker's back, and you know, I'm just going to use Derek Moore just because you know he's a good stand-in for another good young edge rusher. But you bring in a Derek Moore type of player into the building, and now you have three guys, and it's like, oh, it's like we can move these guys. You know, I'm getting excited, Jarvis. I can't.
Hey, man, I understand, man. You got Zach Harrison coming back. You know what I'm saying? Like, pray for some good some good health for big number 96. Yeah, man. Like you got some toys. You can have some toys if you do it right. If this scouting department gets it right, like in a year where there's a lot of talent, all you gotta do is just hit on one of those cats, man, and you're gonna be cooking with grease, man.
Yeah. So we will see what the Falcons do with that. And we'll talk more here with Jarvis Davis about, you know, one potential option at quarterback in Geno Smith next on your next episode of Locked On Falcons. So continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out Locked On NFL for your second listen to get the scoop on what's going on around the NFL. And of course, Locked On NFL Draft has got you covered if you're looking for some combine previews and updates on some of the top prospects to be watching next week in Indianapolis. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network. And certainly check it out, the Everydayer Club. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Locked On Falcons ad-free, members-only Discord access, and so much more. Headed to the link in the description below at lockedonfalcons.supercast.com to find out more. $5 a month or $50 a year. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.